Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Hey Sister. Hey Sister, how you doing?
Hello, sister. I'm feeling blessed and highly favored on this very long weekend.
Blessed and highly favored is definitely the way to feel, huh? Not just on a long weekend, but every day. How about that?
That's true.
All right. Well, we want you all, if you're out there watching, to like, follow, share, and subscribe. We know that it is a holiday weekend, so many of you will probably watch this in the replay. But as always, whether you're watching live or in the replay, join the conversation in the comments. Get involved in the comments. So we got, hey Cam, how you
Hey, Cam.
doing? Thanks for being one of our loyal viewers. So join the conversation in the comments, whether it's live or in replay. We want to see you in the Hey Sister comments. Woo, sister.
Yes.
I am still coming down off of a long week, right? And so I want to say shout out to all the 2021 graduates, whether it's from high school and or college. I just saw one of our sorority sisters, now Dr. Bridget Roberson. She
Okay.
completed her PhD, and so many out there that are doing big things, getting their higher degrees, advancing in education. And I just want to say congratulations to
Yeah.
everybody. Yeah. What you think about that? You got one left in you?
Child. Listen, when the Lord will make a way somehow. But he knows my heart and my bank account, and neither of them is open to another degree unless and until someone should fund it for me. But amen, I'll do the work, but somebody else got to come with the check.
All right. Well, when the Lord say the same, we will all be there. How about that?
All right.
All right. So, hey, Jody.
Hey,
Jody's tuning
Jody.
in tonight. How you doing, Jody Joe? So, in typical Hey Sister fashion, we're gonna start this conversation off with hot topics. And really, there's only one hot topic we want to talk about. And it really makes this Memorial Day kind of puts it really in a whole different perspective, whole different context. Now, Memorial Day is traditionally a recognition of those who died in combat. So those who were served in the military and died in combat. Not like Veterans Day is for all veterans, people who have served. Memorial Day is for people who we remember. But this year's Memorial Day also marks the 100th anniversary of the massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in which what is known as Black Wall Street was destroyed. And so it really kind of makes this Memorial Day, it puts a whole different meaning. There's been a lot of news stories, a lot of news coverage. There's a great article in the New York Times. If you haven't read it, we'll drop the link here. But sister, I just want to toss to you first before we ask the folks out there, what are you thinking about Tulsa at this time?
I obviously we're originally from Louisiana, and of course, being from Thibodeau, we have our own massacre, one that I am producing a documentary about. But I'm so happy that this moment is happening and that people are finally recognizing that this treacherous act occurred, and that so many people not only lost their lives but lost businesses, and that also, but people didn't just stand by and allow themselves to be
Haven't read it. We'll
allow these things to happen. They actually fought back, but of course the I guess I have to say the opponent, enemy, or what have you, was much greater than just local folks in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So just a few things, because I pulled this book out, this is Death in a Promised Land by Scott Ellsworth. This is one of the first books that my father gave to me, or he probably let me borrow it and I just never gave it back, about the Tulsa race riots. And I just remember reading about it, and so many people having not heard about it. So then, of course, when shows like Lovecraft Country and Watchmen started putting it out there in front, it allowed for the masses to see what had actually happened. And now I'm happy that a lot of, celebrities and those who are in Hollywood who have the means as well as the connections are putting money behind funding actual, documentaries and other works about this very important part of history. And so, when I was back in the day, when I worked for a company where I would travel quite a bit, Oklahoma was a part of my territory. And I made it a point to go to Tulsa and go to the Greenwood district and meet the gentleman who owned the local newspaper there and sit and talk and have some conversations, and to walk around and see the markers and just understand like the gravity of how much destruction took place, and how so many businesses, the economic impact of it all. And the interesting thing, and this is the last part I'll say, was, so of course, again, not from Oklahoma. This is prior to GPS as we know it, right? I think you might have been able to rent the GPS systems, but I don't know that for sure. So this is, if you think early 2000s. And I called the local Tulsa Chamber of Commerce. And I remember the whoever the receptionist was, or whoever answered the phone. And I was like, yeah, can you tell me more about, where this occurred and blah, blah, blah. And she was very much like, you have to call the Greenwood Chamber of Commerce. And it was like, okay. I mean, how was I going to know? The name of the city is Tulsa, right? Mm-hmm. So how was I going to know that there was a Greenwood, a specific chamber for the Greenwood district of the city? So it just goes to show that we still have ways to go, but I'm just happy that a light is being shown on this matter and more people are talking about it.
Absolutely. Well, I dropped a question in here. Did you learn about the Tulsa massacre in school? And, as you said, you've been doing your research. We've done our own respective research. There's so many massacres. We saw the movie Rosewood. There's a massacre here locally in the suburbs of Orlando, the Ocoee massacre. And that was when people trying to vote, right? People going to vote. There so many massacres that occurred, which is A, unfortunate, but B, for me, one of the things that really struck me was watching, and I'm gonna let you search her name while I talk about it.
Okay.
But the woman who testified before Congress last week, at 107 years old, to talk about her experience in the Tulsa massacre. So I dropped the link for the article in the New York Times. It's so very well done. It's like amazing, the depth that they go into. But they say, 1,250 homes burned and killed hundreds of residents. I think one of the other quotes, it says over $1.8 billion in losses. That would translate into however many millions of dollars in business losses. So when people talk about looting and terrorizing businesses, when people are protesting, but they don't actually literally have government forces drop bombs and destroy an entire community and try to literally erase human beings.
Yes. And her name is Viola Fletcher.
Viola Fletcher. Y'all go watch the video of Viola Fletcher being speaking before Congress and talk about the impact of being in school and then having to flee and having to find your way to California. So just think about trying to find your way to family in California from Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
in 1921 as a 7-year-old girl, where you were in like the second or third grade, you were going to school, you had your own schools, you had your own doctors, you had your own everything, to then trying to start your life over, and just not even the educational opportunities being available to you. Mm-hmm. It is one of the reasons why people are talking about critical race theory, and that people they don't want to learn about critical race theory. Well, listen, here's the thing. Critical means kind of like that deep assessment and deep thought, and you're looking at the impact that it has had generationally. And if you still living in this country and don't think that we need a critique about the impact of our caste system, since I'm listening to Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, of how our caste system based on race is still impacting people's lives today, then the question is, how do you want to live?
Yeah, so one, I think that part of the reason, no, I don't think that. I know that part of the reason that I decided to do this this Thibodeauville film about the Thibodeau massacre and the labor strike that led up to it is, again, because the implications, right? We see them every day. And to your point about critical race theory,
we see them every day. People want to deflect and not ever get to the root cause, is because it's all putting blame, cast dispersions, and like, put other people down instead of saying, this had a role.
Yes, and that's where I was going. I mean, at the end of the day, part of the reason that I decided to do this was because, again, the implications, we can see them today. And I just firmly believe when you don't learn from history, you repeat it. And we can see that repetition happening. And, I guess I didn't know it was called critical race theory, but I just think it makes sense to examine. I mean, like, just think about it, I guess, as it, in engineering terms, so to speak. If you had a machine, a piece of equipment that was failing constantly, right? You would kind of take it apart and examine different pieces of it. You'd have sensors and you'd look at, what the indicators are. Like, you would examine it critically, analyze it, and determine where the source of your problem is. Because if you think about a big factory, for example, if you have one piece of machinery that continues to fail, then it's going to cost you a lot of money in the long run, and no businesses want to lose money. And so it's just interesting to me that we can see those, we can make those kind of comparisons, say like machinery, but then when it comes to who we are, we don't want to do that. We just had a speaker at my job about anti-Asian sentiment and violence that has happened, and the speaker gave a very candid presentation about where this country started, the indigenous people or native people who were the way they were treated, and the fact that ableism, because the speaker is actually an anti-ableism activist, or different ability activists, and ableism, I'm going to use proper pronoun, they noted was anti-Black, anti-brown, anti-native. And so when then you go back and you get to see some of the comments, and then even if it wasn't a lot, if the one person or the two people who decided to say this isn't fit for, or this isn't right for the workplace, it's an unprofessional presentation, and they seem angry when they made this presentation, I just don't understand why we never want to get to the root cause. We want to keep talking about all the symptoms of the problem, but refuse to get to the root cause of the problem. And it's complex. I get it. It's multi-layered. I understand. We live in a capitalist society. This whole thing was built off of free labor. And if we actually told
Free labor, stolen land, stolen resources.
right, and if we actually told the truth about it, then that means we would have to hold ourselves accountable and responsible, and nobody really wants to do that. But when you see something like the Tulsa massacre, race massacre, when you see what we know as the Thibodeau massacre, when people have sent me this one map with multiple massacres in the South, I'm like, thank you all. I have seen it multiple times. And actually, it's far more than that, than that one map. Violence has been used as a tool to control people and to prevent us from speaking out, because ultimately, if you erase us, then you don't have any history to pass down.
Yeah.
And so we have to make sure we tell these stories. We have to make sure that our voices are not erased. And when people try to say, oh, we no longer live in this sort of society, or when they want to suggest that things like slavery were, what was it? Not indentured servitude. What was the one that y'all had?
The guest workers.
Guest workers, right. No. Underappreciated, not paid, beaten workers, killed workers is what it was. But when we want to whitewash, literally, these things, it does not do any of us any good. And we keep seeing this over and over and over again. And yet, when are we going to learn? I'm not sure.
I don't know. Well, everybody, you're watching tonight. Hey, sister, we thank you for tuning in. We want you to like, follow, share, and subscribe. Also, join the conversation in the comments tonight. We just spent our opening hot topics talking about the Tulsa race massacre, as it is the 100th anniversary of that event, and what it means, and how we're reflecting on this year's Memorial Day a little differently as those things coincide with each other. Mm-hmm. But we're going to move into what we want to talk about tonight. It's about what you watching. What you watching on TV.
That was a segue, boy.
Yeah. Well, but some of the things that we're watching tie into the point you made about those continuing impacts when we choose to ignore when we choose to ignore our own personal history and narrative, mm-hmm. when we choose to ignore the impact of our nation's history and narrative, and what it plays out. And a lot of the entertainment that we're watching are sharing those types of stories and sharing those voices that aren't often heard. So we want y'all definitely get into the comments. So tell us what you watching out there. We'll see if it's on the list of things we're going to talk about tonight. So first up, it's already premiered. We watched it several weeks ago, probably close to a month or so ago, was Concrete Cowboy on Netflix. Concrete Cowboy is about a real life group of urban cowboys in the city of brotherly love and the stables that they kept there. It talks about the community changing around you, about having young people having things to get involved in that are bigger than themselves, and gentrification, the impact that it's having on what were insular communities, but it's also the community within the community, and that people find ways to love, support, and care for each other. The star is Idris Elba, and I can't remember the young man from.
It's McLaughlin is his last name.
Yeah, from Stranger
Things.
But they did a phenomenal job, and actually it is based on a true story of a true group of concrete cowboys in the city of brotherly love. So I loved it. My family loved it. We watched it as a family. Sister, what did you think about Concrete Cowboy?
Yeah, it's Caleb McLaughlin. Sorry, had to look that up. Caleb McLaughlin. Look, I thought it was very well done, and I love that they actually used some of the real cowboys. And so I was like, those people they're not actors, so for them to do so well and integrate so well with those very seasoned actors like Idris Elba and I'm blanking on the sister's name who plays
Lorraine Toussaint.
Yes, Lorraine Toussaint, and even Method Man, because he's becoming quite the actor himself.
Yes, he is.
They seamlessly rolled into that, and what again? So just like you said, tying into the same theme, it just made me feel like, wow, here's a community that's being wiped out, and that community is playing a very vital role for young men like the son's character who was not whose mother, he was being a little unruly and he went to live with his father, and then through this community you learn discipline and caring for something else bigger than yourself. And so I think we briefly touched on it the last time, because since then I was supposed to watch the movie with Michael B. Jordan, and I'm just going all off. But anyway, it pained me to see yet another vestige of our history that we know. Our dad watches Westerns all the time. All the time. And so often those stories are told from this, again, very whitewashed perspective, when there were a number of Black cowboys. And so to see a movie like this in present day sort of times, it does bring a little sadness that there is not more of that community being able to be spread. Instead, it's being destroyed.
Yeah. So I dropped a link in there about the Fletcher Street Urban Riding Club. Go take a look at it. It is absolutely phenomenal. It is streaming. It is on Netflix. But learn more about their organization, because they are a nonprofit organization, 501c3 nonprofit organization. Go learn more about it. If you have a couple coins, donate those coins, because sister, you're talking about our father in Westerns. The Lone Ranger was a Black man, based on a Black man too. We just
Bass Reeves, actually.
Yeah. So we have a long history in doing things that we were told that we never had a part or played a part in, right? So definitely take a look at that if you haven't watched it already. I saw some thumbs up here from Jolindy, so she must have watched it. We also have our brother Fred Billazon, who said he just let us know that he missed us, and we love you too, brother. Keep doing wonderful, great things, and keep tuning in and watching Hey Sister.
And can I just shout Fred out a little bit, because I lived and worked in the Los Angeles area, Los Angeles County, for a decade, and of late Fred has been going to the LA area and working on Skid Row, and I know for myself that is such a humbling experience if you've ever seen Skid Row and seen poverty to that degree. And so I am so happy to see that this brother is using his time, his talents, his treasure to help people who I know very much appreciate it. So shout out to you, Fred.
Shout out, Fred. We have another comment here from Randall saying plenty of real cowboys still in Houston. Absolutely. But again, it's a part of our history that, when we watched
Bonanza.
Yes, we love Michael Landon, but it's not quite the same as when you see yourself on the screen.
Correct.
Well, talk about seeing ourselves on the screen. The season has wrapped for This Is Us. So if you had not watched this, this is season 4.
This is about to be some spoilers.
I'm not gonna try to spoil it for folks, but y'all know This Is Us is the story of the Pearson clan, where the big three, Randall, Kate, and Kevin, who Rebecca is their mother. I know that they're nearing the end of the series. I think they said they were just going to do 5. The creator, listen, it has been some phenomenal TV. One of the best episodes, I know we talked about it earlier, when he went back to New Orleans, found out his mother had roots there in Louisiana, but just so much power in this program about the central, to me, the central character is Randall Pearson.
Absolutely.
The central character is the central relationship. Yes, it's Jack and Rebecca, but it's showing how Jack and Rebecca are reflected in Randall and Beth as they parent their children. They're now 3 children, right? 3 very different daughters.
One of whom they adopted, like Jack and Rebecca adopted.
One of whom, exactly. So it is that parallel. And Mr. Sterling K. Brown, whenever he's not principally shown on the scene, the episode usually falls a little flat for me, because he is such a phenomenal actor. You know, he is such a phenomenal actor. So I'm not going to give no spoilers. I'm just going to say, if you haven't caught, because a lot of people have kind of fallen off, because one of the things, we've gotten lazy with our viewing. We like, because Netflix will drop all episodes, Hulu will drop all 20 episodes of a show. But if we got to come back week after week, we don't know how to act sometimes.
Especially if we got to sit through some commercials. We'd be like, what? Commercials?
Yes.
Like you did that all the time when you were a kid. It ain't that hard.
Right. Like, let them people get their money. Okay. But if you haven't watched This Is Us, if you need to catch up, this season is well worth the catch up. And they did such a beautiful job also of weaving the impact of COVID into this season. And as a parent of a teenage daughter, they've done a very good job of the struggles of the mama looking around like, who this child? Who's she talking to? Because she got me caught in the matrix right now.
Yeah, Rebecca was really, really nice to Kate, but I appreciated that Kate told her mom, you know, I apologize, because yeah, she was a handful. And
I ain't talking about Kate. I'm talking about that little gal.
Well, I'm getting to her too. Kate was a mess too, and because she was kind of mean to Rebecca. And then what's her name, girl, with Beth and Tess, is it?
Yes.
I'm like,
Tess is a mess. She about to get popped right here.
Tess is a mess. And I felt like, look, you don't want to tell no stuff. I'm going to tell some stuff. I don't think I would have redid that dress for her. I don't think I would have.
No.
And it's the principle, because your mama has been trying. She has been trying. And we cannot act like, I mean, it's one thing if you want to act like your mama, if your mama didn't try, because there's plenty of mamas who be like, girl, I don't care about no they, them, us, we, none of that. But in this case, it's like your mother is trying. She's trying to adjust. She's trying to understand. She's trying to use the proper pronouns. You know, you should have already been put out the house when your mama walked in the room with you and your boo. So you kind of already should have been put out the house. So your mother is trying really hard. And oh girl, she would have had to just wear that dress. I'm so sorry.
The level of selfishness in that moment, because this day ain't about you, but you want to make it about, well, nobody's gonna see me. Girl, ain't nobody thinking about you because this ain't your wedding.
Right.
Shut up.
Right. That part.
Listen, I drop a link in here for NBC's This Is Us. If you haven't watched it, actually, this was season 5. Season 6, I think, is going to be their series finale season, and they will tie up all the loose ends. There are some loose ends to be tied up, but it's just been a phenomenal journey with these characters. It's been a phenomenal journey. If you are in that sandwich generation and you're raising children while dealing with your aging parents and how you're managing that, it's a phenomenal series. If you've lost a parent and watching how that has impacted the trajectory of your life, it's just been so many powerful elements to the sibling relationship. The Beth character's relationship with her mother, all the mother-daughter relationships have been phenomenal. When she was like, you always criticize me, I was like, in the spirit, there was something in the spirit in which she said that. I'm like, she done had that conversation with her mama, because all of us done had that conversation with our mother. It was absolutely phenomenal. So
I have one last thing to say. I won't give anything away. All I'm gonna say is I thought it would be the neighbor, not the music teacher.
Girl,
I really thought it was gonna be the neighbor.
Yeah. All right. Interesting. Well, next up on our list that we're watching, which is back for its fourth season, is June and them. And if y'all don't know what June is, I got it. Listen. The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu. Ooh.
June has been pushing me this season. I'm sorry.
June has been pushing me as well, but you know what? As I've watched it and some of the other things that I've watched, watching June, there's a book called Slavery by Another Name. And that's really what this is. It's Slavery by Another Name. It is what we saw on January 6th, and how you can lose your democracy and your rights be stripped away from you by zealotry, acquiescence, and apathy. Handmaid's Tale. Well, I would be one of the, I wouldn't even be a Martha, because I don't know if I'm that good of a cook to be a Martha. But child.
Well, you know, I'd be out up in that field, because they'd be like, you too old to be bearing any of our children at this point, and you ain't cooking frequently enough, girl, because they be baking bread from scratch. I'm so sorry. That ain't going to happen. So clearly I would have been out in that field with the toxicities and things like that. Let me just say this about The Handmaid's Tale. So it's interesting you brought up the democracy part. I had lunch yesterday with 2 of my coworkers, and one of whom is from the Middle East, and he said something that was very profound, which, you know, we were talking about because I hadn't seen him in a year, so we were talking about the incidents that occurred on the insurrection on January 6th. And he was like, I mean, for someone who grew up in a country where I didn't have a democracy, the fact that people are willing to give their democracy away. And when he said that, it was like, because he was telling me about his mother-in-law, why is she's not getting the vaccine, and she believes it's a hoax. And I'm like, after 500,000 people are dead, she still think this is a hoax? And well, it's other things. And so like he and his wife had to sneak and get the vaccine. And I was like, does she not know that you, I said, tell me she's a Trump supporter. He's like, oh yes, very much. I said, does she know that you're not white? Like how do you reconcile, again, all these things in your mind when And this is a great guy. And so I absolutely know why, you know, you would probably want your daughter to marry someone like him because he's an absolute great guy. But I'm like, but how then do you have these thoughts about Trump and vaccines and like when your son-in-law is Muslim and born in the Middle East? I don't get it, but it ain't for me to get. What I will say is when he said, you know, watching people give their democracy away, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And so I think that what's so profound about The Handmaid's Tale is that in many ways, even though this is a piece of fiction, so was the book 1984. And now you go back and read and listen to and see some of the things that were described there, and it's like we are living in 1984, but it's in 2021, you know. And so none of this stuff is too far-fetched. It could absolutely happen. And I think sometimes we think, oh yeah, that would never happen, especially here in the United States. It would never happen. And it's like, but it has happened before.
If you watch any of the after show things, I see that Joe Liddy said, "Lord, praise be." Said, "Sad to say, I have never watched Handmaid's Tale. You should get on it." She says, "I believe if Trump was reelected, we would be on our way to The Handmaid's Tale." And I think folks are still trying. They're trying, going kicking and screaming, trying to get there. But if you watch any of the before shows, the after shows, all the little commentary, one of the things that they say, the creators of this show, is that they have studied things that have been done around the world and atrocities around the world. And everything is based on things that have literally been done with women around the world. It's in season 4, Lakeisha. So, we dropped it in the link in there, and so yes, it definitely could happen. I like watching it. Yes, that's why y'all have y'all passports ready to go. If you ever need to break camp, get out this piece. You're gonna have to get out this piece. But Handmaid's Tale, it's on Hulu now. It is in season 4. And this season has just it once again, it has stretched you. But as I watch June, I think about people with Stockholm syndrome. I think about our ancestors who tried to escape.
Well, I was gonna say that because so you know, Rob was driving back and we were talking about, you know, he was like, oh, no one was at the checkpoint today or what have you, and in New Mexico. And I was like, you know, I don't know what I would do if I saw someone out in the desert trying to come into the United States. I said I would feel compelled to try to help them, you know, at least give them water or some food or something, because all I can think about in the very same way is how our ancestors fought Underground Railroad trying to get to Canada. And, you know, and of course, in this fictional piece, that's where they're trying to get to. They're trying to get to Canada because the United States is not what it used to be. And so I think about, there were a lot of people who helped us and our ancestors get to Canada or get to the North. And so, you know, again, all of these things, all of these incidents and events, they are so, like you said, they're taking actual atrocities from around the globe and weaving them together. But now it's not so much around the globe. A lot of it feels very close to home.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of my other pleasures that is in its 3rd and final season already. Now they always said they were going to have a short season. I thought they could have done a little bit more than 3. I felt they could give us at least 5. They could at least bring us to modern times. But is that of Pose? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Pose is just like a tour de force of television.
No, Billy Porter is a tour de force of television acting.
He's a tour de force of just the talent. Mm-hmm. And you know, your gifts making room for you in your season, right? In your season.
That's the part, in your season. Who? Come on, Jesus.
Yeah, because if he would not, the 20 and 30 years ago, because girl, when I say 20 years ago, I think 1990s, but then I'm like, oh dang.
It's so funny. Wait, I gotta say this real quick. I saw a meme. A meme. I don't know who sent it or where it was at, but it said it basically is like a picture of Beyonce with one of these looks like, and it said something like, you go to buy alcohol and the person gives you your ID back real quick, and you like, dang, you didn't even look at it, and they like, oh, I saw the 19. And I'm like, right, people born in 2000 are of legal drinking age this year.
People born in 2021. What? Oh, child. Anyway, so, but in early 2000s, in the 90s, definitely in the 80s, there was not space for this type of programming on television.
Right. Oh, absolutely not.
And as we talked about, the stories being told, right? I know I did a crazy segue. You said it was a crazy segue, but it leads right into these stories being told. Like, I knew about Madonna Vogue, I knew about ballroom, but really learning more about that culture. I'd watched Paris is Burning,
Mm-hmm.
the documentary. If you hadn't seen that, watch that. A lot of Pose is born out of that. A lot of the stories on Pose they took from that documentary as well. But it is just so brilliantly done. The depth of the characters, the depth of the stories, and to have been able to do all of that in a show that's only been on 3 seasons is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And I know, Ryan Murphy and Stephen Cannells and what's our girl name? Oh my
Janet
God.
Mock.
Janet Mock. They did the doggone thing. And they cast it beautifully. This is not some Tu Wong Fu casting. This is people's real lived experiences, and it comes through in the dialogue in every episode, and I love it. I see Joe Lindy loves it too. That episode about the church, Joe Lindy had sent us a message in our group text, was like, oh, this episode gonna hurt some feelings. That episode about the church. If you just want to go watch some of your favorite 90s sitcom moms on television, from television shows of the 90s, definitely watch this season's episode. I think it's episode 4. But
Take Me to Church.
Take Me to Church. Phenomenal.
Well, I just wanted to add to that you're right about the divine timing of it all, because not only for Billy Porter, but for every one of those actors, even Sarah Bernhardt, she's been a veteran.
Been an ally.
Been a veteran in the game for a long time, and not sure that she's ever really, she was like rising for a while, but even if you think about what happened with Ellen, right? Ellen was on that rise, and then it was like, stop, wait, you gay? Nah, sis, go sit in the corner. And so then, she had to start all over again, and somebody had to be with.
Pause for a second on this. I remember Sandra Bernhard.
Sandra. I'm sorry.
Sandra Bernhard, obviously with her relationship with Madonna, that's in like the 80s, 90s. Right. I remember watching when Richard Pryor had his show, and they had a roast of Richard Pryor, and she was one of the writers for the Richard Pryor short-lived TV show. Right. We talked about Paul Mooney a couple weeks ago in his transition. Like, she was a baby in the game.
Yeah. And so to see every one of those actors get this opportunity, because you and I both talked about, we didn't even put this where we talked about it last week. Did we talk about our Promising Young Woman?
No, we ain't talk about that movie. Oh, we gotta talk.
We gotta talk about that. But even seeing Sister Laverne Cox, let me tell y'all something. I saw Laverne Cox in person. This woman is absolutely gorgeous. I had to rethink my whole life and how I was getting up in the morning and preparing for the day. I was like, she is beautiful.
And see, you got a light beat on now. I was like, I had to go put on some lipstick and put some earrings on because I was like, girl, you was looking a mess right here on the TV screen, on the computer screen, up on the interwebs. You can't be through.
Listen, yeah, a light beat. But I mean, Laverne Cox and doesn't play on pose, but I'm just bringing home the point that it for so long we looked at people, transgendered people, in this way and had such a negative connotation. I'm saying we as a overall, because we not necessarily, but and so to see this moment at this time and this show to tell those, like you said, authentic stories and the reads, baby, the reads. And this is the thing. It's kind of like Black people where we say, in the words of Paul Mooney, everybody want to be Black, but so much of our Black culture is ripped from us and it becomes pop culture. When you watch Pose, you just realize how much ballroom culture is ripped and has just become mainstream pop culture, and credit is not given.
Bravo and the Housewives.
Right. Well, and credit is often not due. Like it's not given where it is due. And so I am happy, at least with the ballroom, when we talking about, like you just said, I had a light beat. Beat. That was the first time I heard beat was from two gay guys back when I lived in Jackson, Mississippi in the early 2000s. And so, and many people hadn't heard it. So we got to give credit where it's due. I love Pose and I'm sad that it's going to be going away. But again, I will close with Everybody Needs a Poppy. And I saw him on GMA, the third hour. And I feel like Poppy is that wonderful in real life. I do.
Well, Janet Mock was married and now she with Poppy. I'm going to just leave it at that.
What? Her and Poppy is together?
Girl, you better go do your Google machine. They met on the set.
Listen, I saw him, like I said, on the third hour of GMA the other day. And I mean, he even got emotional about the fact that the show is ending and stuff. And I was like, man, he seems like that's his personality for real, not even just acting. So, okay, I'm done.
Well, speaking of the ballroom scene, so I got my sister on Legendary. So Legendary is on HBO Max. It's an HBO Max original. It's a ballroom reality competition show where they have the houses compete in ballroom. If you want a good entertainment, good competition, better than Dancing with the Stars, honey, if you don't know about doing them death drops and the duck walks and the 5 elements of Vogue, if you don't know what the 5 elements of Vogue are, you need to go watch Legendary. And especially in that first season, if you watch it on HBO Max, they have all the extras. A lot of these programs, you go and watch the extras and the clips because they break down all of the lingo and the language. And as my sister said, so much is out of that ballroom culture.
Well, the death drops, a lot of people saw that for the first time with Bring It, the woman in Jackson, Mississippi, who has the dance studio and calls them, what she called them. But anyway, and of course, I mean, folks may not want to talk about it, but City Lights was a huge gay club in Jackson, Mississippi, where I'm pretty sure that's where she probably learned about the death drop.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, if you haven't seen Legendary, I'm going to drop the link in there and I'm going to say, you go watch you some Legendary if you want to have you some good entertainment for the evening. for the evening. And it's in its second season right now. I even got my husband watching it now. He like, what is this? Like Arnetta said when somebody got her on pause, they were like,
Her
what?
daughter.
Same thing. My husband's like, what is this you have me watching? And now he's like, oh, I could do that. He could be the MC. He like, oh, I could do that.
No, you cannot.
So back for its fourth season as well. It's one of our favorite summer viewing programs is The Chi. I
just want to know, y'all, they did like, I love Lena Waithe, okay? I love Lena Waithe. But you don't stop disrespecting everybody who dies in this show. Because Brandon died, he halfway had a funeral. Y'all better be talking about Ronnie soon, because that was too much. I had forgot from the last season to this season, and when they
you forgot Ronnie had gone to glory.
I did for a second, and then they showed that piece, and I was like, oh, in the previously on the shot, and I was like, oh, I forgot about Ronnie going to glory, and it was done in such a painful way, and I said. So we had
this. And you got Tracy out here being fast in the tail.
I already knew Tracy. First of all, listen, I was like, ma'am, like I'm actually talking to TV, like, so you just go flirt with that woman husband all in front of her like that?
And then when the woman was like, you can sleep with my husband if you want to, I was like, girl, wait a minute.
That ain't what she said, but yes, that's the PC version of what she said. But and I'm just so happy little Tab got her a little role.
Go ahead on. Shout out to Tabitha Brown. Go girl. You was on doing your little thing on the shot. I'm not mad at you.
I'm not either. It's amazing. Again, divine right time. That sister been trying to get on in Hollywood, and it was her food and her vegan journey that got her on, and now she's got this part on the Shy. So shout out to Lil Tab. But yeah, we don't have to address Ronnie's death because we can't just let that linger from last season and pretend that it didn't happen. Like, come on, sis. Come on.
Well, look. Joe Linda said the Shy starting off with much promises season. Last season, listen, it was Keisha last season, man.
It was.
But I will say this. I love it. I love having watched these young people grow
up. Oh, yeah.
Watch them grow up and be
go ahead.
Yes. Just watching them grow up. And I think it's just very, very interesting program. Y'all need to get into the Shy if you want to. Just even some of the conversations where you think about, especially if you're raising sons, the conversations, the cautions, if you're raising daughters, even because all the things with Keisha, the conversations and the caution that we need to be having with our children. A lot of it is addressed, and I think it's so very, very powerful.
And to see little Kevin, drinking and smoking so much. And you just realize that, there are a lot of young people who are carrying a lot of stuff.
Yes. And they can easily, if you're not on top of it, get lost real fast.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really fast. So you're tuning in to Hey Sister. We have been talking about what we're watching this summer season and some of our favorite shows that have wrapped up, some things that are midway, some things that are launching. We want you, if you're watching this in the replay, make sure you also like, follow, subscribe, share, and join the conversation in the comments. We do try to go back and read your comments and comment on them. So let's start a dialogue. And we're talking about what you're watching. So the next, we're going to talk about a couple things that I've watched some, you've watched some, but neither one of us has watched all of these things. Yesterday was a day that I just kind of was a day for me to kind of binge and just kind of disconnect. Today I did that with reading, just kind of like, let me get into this book that I've been nursing for a while. And so I've really enjoyed my weekend of fully decompressing.
Mhm.
And so I decided to dab my toe in the Run the World, because they ain't had but 2 episodes and they 25 minutes each. So that was real easy to watch. And then you got 25 minutes, 4 minutes of it is 2 minutes on the intro, 2 minutes of the closing credits, 20 minutes. I could do those 2. I caught up real fast. So Run the World is on Showtime. It's a new program on Showtime. It's I guess it's akin to a modern day living single, modern day girlfriend type of situation on show.
Is that with Brisha Webb?
Yes.
Okay, I got it.
Showtime is on Stars.
Okay.
Stars. So if you haven't watched it, if those type of shows are your thing, watch it. Yeah. The jury is still out. It is still out. But if you like those type of programs, female-led dramas, comedy, dramedy series, they're living in Harlem. Take a look at Run the World. Sister, I know you hadn't watched it yet, so
I haven't.
But what you did watch, a documentary on Netflix, which I haven't watched yet, which I want to watch. Actually, I want to do a watch party. I want to do a group of people on.
I would totally watch it again.
Yeah. So In Our Mother's Gardens on Netflix. Tell us about that.
So first of all, it is produced and directed by Chantrell P. Lewis, who is a New Orleans native. And when she comes on the screen, you know she's from New Orleans. And so basically, again, it talks about just these relationships, again, between mothers and daughters, and even extending to grandmothers, and how the impact, because a lot of folks mention, like, some may not have had the closest relationships with their mothers, but they were raised by their grandmothers, or they talk about the things that happened to their grandmothers that led their families to move from one place to the next, and then their mothers came along or what have you. And so it's just really, I think, it's done very uniquely, because there are interviews, there's a lot of graphics, they do some little animation stuff. So it's produced in a very intriguing way, visually. But yeah, it's just, again, about those relationships between mothers and daughters. And even there's a sister they highlight in Los Angeles. I swear I've met this woman before, but she's talking about both, I guess, Chantrell and this lady do some of the I don't know the right word, so please pardon me, but they do a lot of rituals and ancestral work. And so I don't remember the exact practices that they utilize. But she has an altar, and she's talking about cooking meals and cooking her food. And she had her Tony Satcher, this girl, and and making some okra and over rice and stuff. And I think she had the fish and what have you, but putting that up on the altar and talking about how you don't give them bad food, you give them good food, and you welcoming the ancestors and things like that. So it's a lot about who we are as a result of our relationships with our mothers and grandmothers, but also who we are because of those traditions and cultural things that are passed down to us, and some good, some bad. Some of the things that we've had to endure, and our mothers and grandmothers had to endure in their experiences, and how they shape us. So I really enjoyed it. And like I said, when you do the watch party, I would absolutely watch it again, because I'm sure there are some things I missed. And so but Tarana Burke, for example, is in it, and she talks about how her grandmother was never one to show love, and like her and her cousins would try to call their grandmother, to say the words "I love you," and they would call her grandmother on the phone and try to be like, "Okay, grandma, I love you," and she'd be like, "All right then, bye bye." And she was like, they would try to trick her into saying it. And she said, but she can remember this time where she had gone down like to the corner store or something like that. And her grandmother, and this man was there, and he said something to her. She said something smart back. The man slapped her across her face, and then she went home and was like, told her grandmother. And how her grandmother went down there and was outside yelling, and then just bust the window of the store and was like, now don't you ever touch my child again. And it was like one of those things where, as crazy as that was, especially being a little short Black woman in New York, and probably could have gotten into a lot of trouble, it was like, that's kind of the things that showed you that even though she didn't say I love you, she loved you and protected you at all costs. So
yeah, absolutely. So I know for me, I was intrigued when the lady in the preview, because I've just watched the trailer, when she said her grandmother told her that because she said one of her grandmother bet horses and played dice, and the other one had 11 husbands, and her grandmother taught her that man was like a bus, miss one, catch the next.
The next one, yes.
I said, oh, girl, I gotta watch this show. So I look forward to watching it. And so talking about our ancestors and our ancestral journey, High on the Hog is on Netflix as well. It is based off of a book, High on the Hog, and one of those authors, I think it's Dr. Jessica B. Harris, is featured in this. She and the Maya Angelou wrote it. It's available on Amazon. We're gonna drop a link in there for you to go read the review. But it's about the African American food history. It is a culinary journey, but it's also a historical journey of our journey from Africa, from West Africa. It starts off in Benin, in West Africa, and to the United States. And they cover a lot of the topics we talked about losing heritage and traditions, but the heritages and traditions that we have, that as a nation people have adapted or adopted and say it's American, but really no, it's rooted in Africa. And why certain people were brought, like, the Carolinas known for rice, because they tried to grow other crops beforehand that didn't quite work because of the climate, but they brought some people who knew how to grow rice. And that's why they have their rice crop, so the rice, the indigo, certain crops that we have, people were brought here because of what we know, what we were able to do. They were farmers. So when people say about folks not being able to manage land, raise, all of those lies that people are taught, all of that is explored in this documentary. So if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's a slower pace, but also very magical. And you recognize so many of the foods, and being from, we have some foods that are in our history simply because of where we because of our experience, and how we also were able to take nothing and make something great out of it. So that's who we are, that resiliency as people.
Yep.
So those are two documentaries. And then last thing I'll just throw out there, this was in a book club a couple years ago. I never finished reading the book, The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. I watched the show on Amazon Prime, and one of the things I was telling my sister is like, I told my husband the same thing. I'm still kind of like processing, because there's so many things that were left unanswered. But I think that's the experience. And so we started off talking about Tulsa. And we were talking about the connection for the things that happened there and their impact today. With stories being told. So as we talked about a Pose or a Legendary and just the whole LGBTQ community, specifically the Black LGBT community, and their stories not being told. Or in documentaries like In Our Mother's Gardens or High on the Hog, there's history.
Mhm.
There's so much history. And there's still a lot of loose ends. And I think for me, as I reflect back on Underground Railroad, and I'll probably watch it again, so I can see what I missed the first time, as you said, we're still unfolding. We're all still unfolding, but we have to know where we started from, whence we've came to have to be our compass of where we want to go. So that's the last one for me. I know you haven't watched it yet, but I wanted to throw that out there for everybody to consider consuming Underground Railroad on Amazon Prime, and know that you'll probably still have more questions than answers when you get to the end. Anything else you want to toss out about what you're watching, sister?
Well, the only other thing, like I said, and I don't remember if we talked in depthly about it, was Promising Young Woman. We both watched it. I think we both came away feeling like I got some.
Promising Young Woman is a movie. The young lady was nominated, the lead actress was nominated for an Oscar this year. That's the only reason why I saw when she hosted Saturday Night Live, I was like, who is she? And then I was like, oh, I'd seen the previews because a lot of movies premiered on our televisions this year because of COVID. And so I watched it. You mentioned Tarana Burke earlier, who started the Me Too movement before Hollywood actresses picked it up.
Right.
Yeah, Promising. I told you all, I watch a lot of historical pieces, and I've always walked away with the lives of women have been perilous throughout history.
Yes.
And they still are in the year of our Lord, 2021.
Yes. And I think what really strikes me, and again, going back to what we talked about Tulsa, what I'm observing with through my work with Thibodeauville, even looking at going back to January 6th, or even Charlottesville, I am not sure why young white men are so angry and so, what is the word? Violent, but also there is a level of perversion, for lack of better words, that exists there underneath the surface, to think that if you see a girl who's intoxicated, that it's okay to try to take advantage of her. Mm-hmm. And not saying that this was that the overall message of course, it wasn't just about white men. But when I think back to the swimmer boy, I can't remember his name. I don't want to remember his name from Stanford, who was let off, even though he raped that young woman next to a dumpster. When I think about Matt Gaetz right now, and then when I think about Rudy Giuliani at the end of that Borat movie, where you don't know how old this young woman is. They said she was 15, but you don't know how old she is, and yet you were okay being inappropriate. There's something that just is so perverse about that. And I just, and again, it goes back to thinking about the shy, what we have to do to protect young women, because violence against women is something that we have accepted across this country
for millennia
and across this world. But again, I think sometimes when it comes to this country, we like to say, oh, like think that we're better because women don't have to dress a certain way. They don't have to cover their heads. They don't have to, they can hold jobs or what have you. But it's like, no, in many ways, we're not that much better. We have really put young women, particularly, like you said, live in very precarious situations. And I saw something yesterday that Valerie Jarrett posted, and it said something about it's so easy to be deemed something like it's so easy to be deemed a difficult woman. That's why there are so many of us. And then she talks about finding her voice or what have you. That's the thing. Women who fight back, women who stand up for themselves. Even we talked about in Florida, this man tried to kidnap this 11-year-old child from the bus stop in broad daylight. A 30-year-old who already had a history of sexual assault against children tried to kidnap this child in broad daylight. And you're just like, how is it that folks feel like they have agency over a woman's body? They can do anything they want. And particularly when it comes to these young white men. What in the devil? So
and also, and as it comes to our political arena, bringing us back to Handmaid's Tale, because there were women who were standing behind the governor of Texas as they signed a piece of legislation that, rules that you can't, outlawing abortion past, I think, 15 weeks. Like most people don't even know they're pregnant at 12 weeks.
Right.
So 13, 14, 15 weeks, most people don't even know they're pregnant at that point.
Yeah.
So again, but the women who stand behind and support the men in the subjugation of other women, and that's also brought out in the movie Promising Young Woman.
Oh, and you know what else I watched? I'm sorry. Boy State. I watched that too. Did you see that?
I haven't watched Boy State.
Because that ties into that whole Texas legislation thing. To hear these young boys talking about how important, pro-life and anti-abortion, and you like, what y'all know about that? Have you been pregnant yourself? And I'm not saying that people can't have their stances about. If you're pro-life, don't get an abortion.
How about don't get pregnant?
Don't get pregnant. Don't get an abortion. But also don't be for the death penalty. Also, don't keep turning a blind eye when folks want to wake up in the morning and go to work and shoot people who don't look like them because you mad that day. Everybody, whenever we talk about police brutality, they always want to say, but what about Chicago? What about black on black crime? Well, every time y'all want to talk about abortion, I guess we need to be like, well, what about the death penalty? But what about these people coming and shooting folks up at the school? Like, if you are pro-life,
what about January 6th that you don't even want to investigate?
Right. If you are pro-life, be pro-life. It doesn't work for you, but the idea that folks think that they can just legislate women's bodies, and like you said, the other women who participate in the subjugation of women, it's exhausting. But Boy State was also a very interesting one.
Well, that is going to wrap us up tonight as we talked about what you're watching. There's a lot of great programming out there. Being home, we watch movie premieres from home. We watched some really great programming. We're getting into the summer part and the summer hiatus time. So there'll be longer stretches of breaks with Hey Sister as well. But we thank you. This is the time for you to then go catch up on all the Hey Sister episodes you missed. Yes. So make sure that you are following us on YouTube, on Facebook. Go back and watch the episodes that you missed. Tune in. There it is. That's how you can follow us on all those channels. So go watch the episodes that you missed. Be sure that you're sharing it with folks in your life. Tell them, hey, get ready, because Sundays is Hey Sister time. And with that, we're going to sign off for this evening. Say good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.